Marvin Devine. I'm saying bye to all the lies and all the times you cried, saying that I wasn't right, yet I was right by your side. You manipulator, playing games, your friends commentators, and I don't know what you say about our private conversations, but it's got them hating. Thanks to all the rumors you be claiming. It's cool, I'm done with you, so they can throw you a celebration. You gon' hate it when you see me with somebody living better. I'm trying to tell you that me just doing me gon' have you jealous.
Hello, folks. Welcome back once again to Chris Wyatt Reports. And my guest today is a frequent guest in the program over the past several years, the Chief Executive Officer of AfriForum, Kallie Kriel. Kallie, hoe gaan dit?
Nee, baie goed, dankie, Chris. It's great speaking to you again. I hope things are well there in the US as well.
We're a little consumed with Iran and Ukraine and Israel and, oh yeah, there's that South Africa issue.
But all the best with that.
Well, thanks. Yeah, good luck with that. As they said in The Princess Bride, have fun storming the castle, boys. Anyway, yeah. That's one of the best lines in movies ever. So, Kallie, you met recently with Jacob Zuma, former president of South Africa, leader of the MK party. A party that I don't usually have a lot of complimentary things to say about, so in interest of full disclosure. But you met with Jacob Zuma, and there was discussion, according to the media, about Section 235 of the Constitution. Now, you can correct me. I'll stand a correction, because my back is sore anyway, so it's been good to stand. But I'll stand a correction what I get wrong here. But as I've said many, many times, AfriForum is a civil rights organization. It's not a political party, because you used to get attacked all the time by know-nothings in the social media about, about your running for office. But you don't run for office. You're a civil rights organization. But you do approach multiple political parties. So from that standpoint, I believe that's probably why you engage. But I think people are curious, why did you go talk to Jacob Zuma? Did I get anything wrong in my description?
No, definitely not. The fact is, you're right. We're not a political party because we don't want to work for the next election. We want to work for the next generation. And to achieve that, we cannot have short-term goals just to try and win votes. We have to do what is best on the long term, and even if that might not be popular in some circles. As you've correctly said, MK is not a party that you can compliment actually about anything. And of course, we are strongly opposed to the party. But when you have a just cause, such as ours for self-determination, and you have self-confidence to promote that cause, you don't have to be scared with regard to who you speak to. You should make sure that you give your message to those that are friendly towards your cause and also those that stand negative to it. We had three things we wanted to achieve. In the first place, we have to have the moral high ground. In terms of the campaigns, as you know, we have a number of methods, influencing the public thinking in the stage, participating in public participation process in parliament, going to courts, and also sometimes promoting international pressure if necessary. But to be able to do that and be on a moral high ground, you must also be willing to talk. And we can at least say, when we go into such a campaign, we also tried speaking. The same was with regard to President Ramaphosa. Before we went to the US regarding the Kill the Boer chant, we wanted to speak to him. We wrote a letter to him and he totally ignored that letter. And that is why we had to go ahead. So afterwards, when he said, why didn't we find South African solutions for South African problems, we could say, well, we were willing to speak. And that is the same now with Section 235, the self-determination clause. At least in this campaign, we can say we tried to solve it through discussions. Secondly, it was also important to make sure that we convey the message that the MK party, that they are acting directly against the interests of a large part of their support base. Why I'm saying that, if you're going to look within the Zulu community, the Nkonjama Trust, which has control over about more or less a third of the KwaZulu-Natal province, that is under control of the royal institutions. So that is actually a good example of self-determination where you don't have government control over that land. And what we are seeing now from MK, if they attack self-determination, they might be aiming at Urania, but they will also be shooting the Ngonyama Trust and a number of traditional councils across the country in traditional communities. And then the last point why it was important, we know we've seen a big propaganda campaign against AfriForum in the last 2 years or year and a half, and that is aimed at isolating us, to actually try and portray that nobody really should speak to us in South Africa. Fortunately, that has not trickled down to grassroots level. Our cooperation agreements with numerous traditional communities continue, but we should never take that for granted. So it's always important in a symbolic way to say, well, we even speak to those that we oppose. Then, of course, people on grassroots level would also see no reason why not to speak to us. So that is broadly the issues I wanted to mention. The fact is, there are a lot of questionable people within MK. But the political reality in South Africa is, if you're not going to speak to people that are questionable, then you can actually speak to no or very little members of the political elite. Then you can never speak to the ANC. You cannot speak to President Ramaphosa because he's got the pala things that he needs to answer. You cannot speak to the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, because there's a lot of allegations with regard to tenders that his son's got. You cannot speak to the ANC because the Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula, is accused of corruption with regard to a holiday in Dubai. And so I can mention 94 ANC leaders mentioned in the Zondo Commission. So unfortunately, we don't have the luxury in this country just to speak to those people that you like. We owe it to our children and the next generation that we have to go into these talks, hard talks, and we have to do it with self-confidence.
So, Kallie, there's a lot to unpack there, but I did want to address one thing that I've previously analyzed. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I am not a member of AfriForum, nor am I a member of AfriForum Abroad, just so people know that, because people might assume that because I'm objective, and not everybody wants to be objective. They think it's in the tank for someone. But I've talked about this in the past, this effort to isolate AfriForum amongst political elites to keep people from engaging with you. That is an effort, in my view, to keep you from engaging with traditional black communities, Indabas, and with Dikosi and other leaders around the country, something the AfriForum has been engaged in, what the press never reports on. I'm one of the few people who actually reports on that. You've been doing that for years. And my view of that is it was intentional so that if you're not engaging with black South Africans, then you can be called racist because you're just talking to white South Africans. Do you think there's a concerted effort amongst political elites to achieve what I just described?
Yes, most definitely, but I'm thankful to say that it has failed. Of course, the success we see in that strategy for them, we see it in areas that we expected to succeed, with regard to the left in the media, with regard to politicians that's part of the ruling elite. But I think fortunately for us, that they have dismally failed with regard to what is happening on grassroots level. The fact is the influence of the political elite in this country is dwindling. We know that the ANC got less than 40% of the vote, and also a very small number of people vote. So if you're going to look at what the support is the ANC has, it's a minority part of the community. So the vast majority of people would agree with the fact that we need a better future for all our children. We need a country to prosper and we need to build. And the general feeling that we get on grassroots level is a feeling of mutual recognition and respect amongst communities. And that is also what we base our agreements with, for instance, the Barolong Buseleka community in the Free State, with the Amabele community in the Eastern Cape, with the Nkungumati community where we have cooperation in KwaZulu-Natal, and a number of others. But as I've mentioned earlier, we cannot take that for granted. So we have to make sure that the ANC continues to fail with its isolation efforts. And one method is, of course, to be seen into discussions such as the one with Mr. Zuma. So we are quite thankful. The ANC, they're failing in their efforts, and we can continue to promote our cause. And in this regard, I think our next big hurdle is to make sure that the constitutional clause regarding self-determination, that we do retain that.
Well, Kallie, I'm a little confused. I mean, I've watched SABC, Newsroom Africa, I've read News 24, The Independent Line, The Daily Maverick, The Times, The Sunday Times. I've read all these publications, and while they may not explicitly come out and say it, all of them seem to imply that AfriForum is a racist organization. What are you doing talking to all these traditional communities? I mean, did I miss something? Are these traditional communities made up of a bunch of Burkis, or are they actually Tswana and Sutu and Xhosa people? I mean, why are you talking to all these black people if you're a racist organization? Something doesn't jive here.
Yeah, no, I think the media reports, that's of course totally misguided. And I think in the US, it's more or less the same what you would sometimes experience on CNN. What we are seeing here, these news outlets you've mentioned, they're part of the media institutions that they don't let facts get in the way of the story they want to convey. So that is totally false. But what we should also remember is there's a reason for these allegations. There's an old strategy in South Africa. If your opponents, if I can call them that, if they cannot answer your arguments, they want to silence you by intimidating you. So our old method was calling you a racist. And people don't want to be called a racist because that's not a good thing to be. But they call it to people, and then you say, okay, let me rather stay quiet because I don't want to be accused of that. Or they are saying, you want to bring back apartheid, or you want to protect white privilege. Some of us, they accuse of high treason, and then hope you retreat. But the bad news for them is that strategy only works if we allow it to work. So they can call us what they want. We have to make sure that these allegations against us are not true, and they aren't. And also, people on grassroots level that have first-hand experience in working with us would then also know it's not true. So what you are seeing at the moment is that the media are losing credibility, especially those that are trying to portray us in a bad way. And you also see it in the US, where media institutions are losing credibility. And fortunately, we are now able to bypass, in a big manner, these negative reports through social media, with podcasts, with discussions with people like yourself, where we can get our message out there, and they no longer have a monopoly on communication, on the stories that are going out. And I think that's our saving grace. So we see what they are doing, but we smile and wave and continue doing the work that we believe is necessary.
Well, Kallie, you've definitely got a fan here in Lorraine Slabbert, who wrote earlier a couple of times in Afrikaans. What a great job, wonderful job you're doing. And what a great job that AfriForum is doing. But let me shift back to the Section 235 argument in the Constitution, which guarantees the right of self-determination within South Africa. Now, you mentioned something that I've been pointing out all along, is that if people want to attack Oranje, which is a private corporation, by the way, it's a corporation which has its rules. And as they've stated, as long as you adhere to their norms, Afrikaans and your Dutch Calvinist, and agree to community rules, you can live there, which would mean I couldn't live there. I'm not an Afrikaner. I'm not a Dutch Calvinist. I'm a Methodist, although I'm breaking away from that church because they're allowing gay priests. But anyway, so I wouldn't be eligible to live there, and I wouldn't. They'd chase me away, but I wouldn't feel welcome there because it's for a specific community. That's cultural determination. But I've talked about Orania in that sense, and there's virtually no consideration. I'm curious to see what Jacob Zuma had to say when you mentioned this. Well, if you strip away that clause in the Constitution, 235, and then places like Orania are not allowed to exist, what happens to the Unganyoma Trust? Can I go there now? Can I buy land in Zulu land and be a big property owner? I mean, can Indians do it? Can they take over sugarcane fields there? I mean, what was his response to, did that come up in the conversation, the hypocrisy? I mean, you probably didn't present it as hypocrisy, but it is hypocrisy. Or did they not realize that they're cutting their own throat?
Yes, I think the whole process is driven by some parliamentarians that MK has. And I try to portray to him that these statements are out of touch with MK's biggest support base, because the biggest support base are people with conservative traditional values in the KwaZulu-Natal rural communities. So that message was conveyed. Of course, we didn't expect him to come to the fore and say, you know what, I've listened to you and what we are doing is a bad idea, but he also did not say it's a good idea. So as a first step, it was to convey that message and send out a symbolic message, as I've said before. Just with regard to Section 235, for the international community, if one tries to explain why is this needed in the country, unlike the US, we are not a federal state. So when you have a federal state, there's devolution of powers, or federal states have powers where the federal government does not have control. We don't have it here. We have a centralism in the country where from Pretoria, this control is exerted over the whole country. Provinces that we have limited powers in terms of municipalities in the country are actually regional governments. It's not local at all. So because we have this central control, and if you then have a corrupt and incompetent government, it leads to a situation where the whole country is deteriorating. So self-determination, in a sense, creates a position to try and remedy where federalism is not available, to say, well, allow communities to take their future into their own hands. And that starts on grassroots level, to say a form of self-determination is a school governing body that consists of parents deciding what the language policy of a school should be. That is a form of self-determination. Of course, we know of the Bello Act, the say of parents is being attacked at the moment. The same with our neighborhood watches. If the police are not doing their job well, and communities say we are going to take control of our own safety, that is a form of self-determination. If we start looking after our own heritage sites, that is a form of self-determination. If we have institutions such as universities and artisan training, that is self-determination. And then it goes right up all the way to the Ngonyama Trust, as well as the traditional councils, as well as Orania. Just with regard to the last point, but it's also propaganda against Orania, because, you know, if you look at international media, but also locally, they would say the whites only enclave. But if they go to the Nkungumati community or Nkandla and KwaZulu-Natal, they won't report it's a blacks only enclave. Then I would say it is a traditional Zulu community or whatever community. There are literally hundreds of traditional communities in this country that's troubling nobody. And that's part of the double standards. Because you have a place, well, let's then call it the traditional community, simply because it consists of Afrikaners, it is now a racist, whites-only enclave. But that, of course, is also, that double standards is an effort to destroy the existence of any form of self-determination for Afrikaners. And of course, this effort to scrap 235 is part of that effort, and that is why we have to oppose it as strongly as possible, even if it means we have to also have discussions with MK.
Well, speaking of those discussions with MK, Jacob Zuma, Jay-Z, is a very complicated person who, from my point of view, is really just an opportunist. He jumps on whatever bandwagon or fits his need. And let me explain what I mean by that. First off, he's an octogenarian. He's 84, so I don't know how much longer he'll be around. But he famously approached Afrikaner groups when he became president, and talked about their right for them to exist and how they're a key part of the country. But at the same time, he runs around at rallies singing "Kill the Boer," and so he also, of course, was responsible for the pilfering and looting of the country, and we'll never forget the arms scandal. But a very complicated individual. It seems to me that maybe with Jacob Zuma, it's when you catch him. And if you catch him at the right time, he'll support what you're talking about. So with your meeting you had with him, what sense do you have? Is he there? Some people are saying that he's getting a bit old. Was he involved in the conversation? Is he lucid, cogent, and is he still in grasp of his faculties? I'm not trying to say he's not, but I'm just asking because we don't see him much since the last election. He's been pretty quiet.
Yeah. Well, of course, I don't want to convey personal opinions with regard to somebody else's health. But I think it's obvious that he has become older. I have also become older. And the tone of the discussions was not necessarily the same as the discussions we've had 10 years ago. With regard to, he still, you can have a discussion. It's not as if he doesn't understand the issues. He remembers the issues. I reminded him, you mentioned the days when he just started as president, when he had discussions with Afrikaner groups. I remember quite well that he said to us, when we spoke about Urania, he said he doesn't have a problem because Urania is the Nkandla of the Afrikaners. And
that's why I asked the question. I just want to make sure that he remembers his words from 15 years ago.
Oh. No. So I reminded him of that, and he laughed, and he remembered it. So let's follow up on this. The fact is, what we also need to do is now, through our cultural network, get other traditional communities to come to the fore in support of traditional 235. And I don't know if you've seen over the last 2 days, the chief of the Nama people, which is actually some of the first people in this country from the Khoisan groupings, also came to the fore and said they want to support Section 235. We also have those communities that we work with in KwaZulu-Natal. Also, we are getting to a process. We want to get a broad statement saying we support 235. And of course, we know that, as you've said, opportunism in politics is people want to get support. And if they think they're going to get support by targeting Section 235, they will do so. So our task is to show that they will lose support. And this is not the popular thing to do amongst traditional communities. And I'm confident if we go on that route, we will make positive progress without being naive about it. In the end, we will fight it on various platforms. Of course, it's still a long way that this process has to go. If it gets to a committee stage, there will have to be public participation in the process. We know many times mistakes are made, so you can take the process that was followed to court. But I think also in terms of what the international community should know is that Section 235 was actually part of the promises that were made by the ANC to make the transition happen. Many Afrikaners wanted self-determination and did not opposed the centralized system that Rolf Meyer negotiated with the ANC. And then they said there were 34 principles. Remember, the constitution that we have today was not negotiated before 1994. There were 34 principles that were negotiated, and the parties agreed that they would be included in the final constitution. So self-determination was section 30, or the 34th principle that eventually came in. Of course, that section, we should also not be naive. It does not enforce self-determination. We would have wanted it much stronger. But what it says, it doesn't prohibit it. It says you have the right, within the framework of the broader South Africa's right to self-determination, to work for self-determination for people that have a similar culture, and there's a number of other issues that are mentioned there. So it allows us to work for it. Why is it important? Because if you look at how things are going in the country now, and people just accusing you of high treason, if you're going to say you want a different form of state, they can easily then accuse you of high treason, trying to undermine the state. And that part of the Constitution says you are allowed to work for self-determination. So it just creates some space for us. It doesn't give it to us, but it gives us space to make sure that we create certain realities on the ground where we can create a future for our children.
Well, Kallie, you touched on something I wanted to raise just a moment ago at the beginning of your comments there, and that was specifically about communities that are traditionally left out of power structures in South Africa, whether it's in the past or under the National Party, the distant past, or under the ANC and specifically. And that's the First Peoples, if such a term can be used, of South Africa, the Khoi and San peoples, of whom the Nama are included, the Griquas, the Busters, and many of the Cape Coloreds, the Cape Malays, and others are mixed in with the, that's amalgamation, but not specifically the color community, I misspoke there, but specifically about the Khoi and San communities, who are largely neglected. And in fact, the government of South Africa refused to acknowledge that the Nguni-speaking peoples, like the Europeans, also colonized South Africa. They came after existing peoples were there and marginalized them, and they continue to marginalize them to this day. In fact, things are so bad that Nu, a language thought to be extinct, but then discovered there were a few people left. There's only one speaker left of it in Uppington, Oma Katarina Esau. She's the last first language speaker of the language. It's sad to see what's happened to languages disappear. I think it's important to protect and guard Afrikaans as much as possible. But same with Khoi and San languages. These folks have been excluded from political structures for such a long time. It's interesting to see that the Nama leader of the Nama Nation has come forward and say, we want to protect 235. Is this outreach that you've done, or did they approach you? And will AfriForum seek to incorporate other groups that would have an interest protecting other cultural standards and norms and languages?
No, this was an outreach that was done by us because we saw that the polarization will always be on a political elite level. If you have leftists in government, we then said, okay, let's then start building good relationship on a horizontal level with all other peoples in the country. And as I've mentioned, we started with these agreements. Last year, we then formed a network of cultural communities that started off with 30 different cultural communities or traditional communities that came to the fore to start talking to one another. And I think that would be the saving grace of the country against the centralism. If you build a strong network of cultural communities on grassroots level. And I think this statement by the Nama leadership is actually the first fruits that we are seeing from these efforts. Remember, centralism is a threat to all these people because, even though the South African Constitution speaks about unity in diversity, the government, they governing like, and they, in Mozambican leader once said, for a nation to live, the tribe must die. And that is what we are seeing in terms of what nation building means to the ruling elite at the moment. They think the tribe must die. They show disrespect also to traditional communities, not only to Afrikaners. And they want to make South Africa a monolingual English-speaking country rather than building schools that function in the language of the various communities. They want to make everything English. And I think in that sense, it's a threat to all cultures in the country. We want to go to a situation to say there should be unity in diversity. That's actually what's written in the preamble of the South African Constitution, but we don't see it in practice. We see the opposite. And we have to make sure that we build that unity in diversity. And in the end, that will give us a stronger base also to fight for the right to self-determination.
Kallie, the situation with all the legislation that was passed in last parliament and signed by President Ramaphosa or about to be signed by him includes things like expropriation without compensation, a clear and distinct violation of Section 25 of South Africa's current constitution. And I need to remind the audience, written and drafted by the majority black government and promulgated by a majority black government in the late 1990s after the end of apartheid. Section 25 is clearly violated by expropriation without compensation. Nil is nothing. It can't. You have to have compensation. So, expropriation without compensation. The Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, which forces English to be foisted upon Sotho and Xhosa and San and Afrikaner and Portuguese children who don't speak the language when they arrive at primary school. It's cultural genocide, in my view. And then, of course, you have national health insurance, which is an abomination of communism coming your way. And the Employment Equity Act, which specifies that only 4.3% of your senior managers and middle managers can be white men. These policies all seem to be designed to create a monolithic, centralized state where the state tells you what you're going to eat, when you get to eat, and what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. I know that AfriForum has been involved in legal cases and some of these things. What's the status of any or all these things? Is AfriForum still involved in court cases? Because the Democratic Alliance has boasted how they oppose all these things, but they've gone very quiet since joining the Government National Union. I'm curious what AfriForum is doing.
Yes, with regard to the whole issue of expropriation without compensation, we started a court case against the Expropriation Act. And that is in the courts at the moment. It will probably take another year or two. I think we are definitely going to be successful with regard to Section 9.2 of the Expropriation Act. For the people that don't know, that section says expropriation can take place and then you can go to court within 180 days. But those people that know how the court system works, there's a backlog. So if you're now going on an opposed court roll, it takes you 3 years to get a court date and then it can only start. So your land will be expropriated. So it means you lose your income. Then you will have to go in a 3 to 5 year court case with your own funds. And that would mean people would rather say, okay, let me just take less, at least I get something. So what happened there, in the answering affidavit, President Ramaphosa acknowledged that should change. He actually proposed some words saying the court should actually decide first before it happens. But you cannot just read such a difference just in. So we believe, even if the court says you can just read in the new sentence, then it's also helpful. Then we achieve that. Unfortunately, Section 12.3 that allows for expropriation with no compensation, he's still defending that. But we are fighting that in the courts. And that, of course, also, if you look at some of the pressure that we see from the US is with regard to to property rights, because we know more than 600 businesses that we have from the US that are working, have invested in South Africa. If property rights aren't guaranteed, they won't invest here. The same applies to any other international company. So we are going to continue with that pressure. We appreciate international pressure by companies that says we can't invest if property rights are threatened. So we are going on with that. With regard to the BELA Act, there is a process now of drawing up norms and standards for language policy. We are making extensive inputs in that regard. We believe there's a good chance that we will have a good impact on that. But we must always remember that is a third prize. It's not the first prize, not the second prize, but at least it's a prize. The first prize is that there should never have been such an act, and it should not have been approved and fully implemented. So what we will do now, apart from looking how we can influence the act through norms and standards, our legal team is also ready. So when the BELA Act is used in a manner that we can show it's an abuse of power, we will challenge that in court. But we need a specific case study, and as soon as that happens, we will go to court.
So, I've got to ask you, Kallie, I mean, how do you deal with this? I mean, it's got to be frustrating at times, the portrayal in the media, the rude and disrespectful, abusive behavior you get from people asking you questions when you appear on television in South Africa. I mean, some of these idiots are just beyond the pale, bigots. And I mention this because you just got to let it, I guess, be like a duck and let it roll off your back, because it just must be at times very frustrating to deal with all this stuff. I deal with it, but I'm sure not nearly as much as you deal with it and AfriForum does. But you were also attacked along with some other folks and called treasonous for exercising your constitutional rights, freedom of speech, freedom of association. These are guaranteed under the South African Constitution. I've pulled up the sections of the Constitution. Also, the freedom to travel within the country and outside the country. These are all your rights under your Constitution. Yet you were called treasonous because, unlike the government of South Africa under the GNU and the African National Congress in particular, which runs all foreign policy, there is no debate, it's the ANC. The ANC refused to engage with the United States after its racist ambassador was PNG'd and sent back to South Africa. And even before that, they weren't engaging with us clearly. But groups like AfriForum, COSATU, and the Democratic Alliance, as well as business leaders, made a genuine effort to engage the U.S. government and U.S. industry to keep the ties going, while the ANC was ignoring the United States and exacerbating the damaged relationship that the ANC created. How do you deal with all this? It's got to be frustrating at some point. I mean, being called treasonous to your own country that you love because these politicians are playing populist politics. How do you guys hang in there?
Well, I think criticism, the effect that it has, depends on who criticizes you. If my wife criticizes me, that would be worrying, and I'll have to make sure that I think of it quite well and see how we can correct the situation. With people within our community that has a strong course of view of a calling to create a better future, if they criticize you, you won't like it. But we must remember, if people from the far left, whose objective is to actually make sure that they put pressure on the Afrikaner community, if they criticize you, then I actually see it as a compliment, because if we did not have a positive impact in what we were doing, they would have simply ignored us. So it's probably a weird way of thinking that, but I enjoy it, especially, we've spoken already about the 40 Afrikaners that are attacking us. It's actually for me great that that those people that have a totally different worldview and that want to create a different situations where Afrikaners simply assimilate, if they are angry with us, it means we are successful in opposing the route they want to take us. So in that sense, I think the more attacks we get, it actually motivates us to just continue with what we are doing.
Well, I get that, but Kallie, I mean, there actually was supposedly a police investigation launched into so-called treason. I mean, when people hold political power and they can abuse power in such a fashion, I mean, there's no basis whatsoever here to even contemplate a case of treason, but not just against you, but against others. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And we saw the approach by the president when a member of his own coalition went to the States and was given a list of requests or demands, however you want to view it, from the U.S. government in order to improve relations. He asked for an office call, and as a leader, now he wasn't leader at the time, but now he's the leader of the party, Corney Mulder, the oldest or longest serving member of parliament, was refused an office call with the president. He said, I'm not going to talk to him. That just shows a complete disdain. But the fact that the people can abuse the system, actually get the police to investigate treason over just a nothing burger, as Hillary Clinton would say. I mean, that's got to be a little disappointing, because I mean that might mean that at some point you had to hire attorneys to protect yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a symptom of a broader problem in the country where some democratic values are being disrespected. So it's not something personal for me. It actually shows a breakdown in the total criminal justice system, where we don't have equality before the law, where we see that the criminal justice system is abused, and some people are protected against prosecution. We know that there are 94 ANC leaders that were implicated in the Zondo Commission report with regarding to corruption. They are protected, and then others are targeted. And we know that investigation is still ongoing. So they have not come to the fore and say, no, there's no case in this regard, but it's an effort to intimidate us. So I think if we are worried, it's actually worried about the broader implications of this, where you have a government starting to act like things that you expect in autocracy, where political opponents would be thrown in jail. But if they go ahead with us, that it would be bad for us as individuals, but of course it would further expose the problems that we are seeing in the country, and with regard to the way that minorities are being treated in the country.
Well, speaking of people who like to intimidate, let's turn our attention, or at least my attention. You're welcome to comment if you want, or if you want to pass, you can. One Julius Malema, a bum-hurt former member of the African National Congress, kicked out, who started a party that's just full of a bunch of prison jumpsuit-wearing members of parliament, and it's declining rapidly. Its popularity is on the wane, as it should have been a long time ago. They are virtually a rounding error in KwaZulu-Natal, wiped out in the last elections, and in municipal elections, they're likely to do very poorly. But Julius Malema has now been convicted in civil court, his threats against Dante van Wyk, and now he's a convicted felon, court having determined that his firing of live ammunition from a rifle and a handgun in the air nearly a decade ago leads to a criminal conviction and a 5-year prison sentence, which he's not currently serving. Julius Malema is been given a bond. He can be out on bail, so to speak, while he appeals this sentencing. But he cannot appeal the judgment. He is forever convicted criminal now, much like Winnie Mandela, who kidnapped Stompie and was a convicted felon for that, and then defrauded Parliament. She was convicted of that under the ANC. But Julius is a convicted criminal, yet he sits on the Judicial Services Commission. AfriForum, I saw the response from Jacques Brudrick, one of your representatives there. I believe that AfriForum was probably satisfied with the outcome of that, with a prison sentence. Any thoughts or comments on the recent conviction and then sentencing of Julius Malema?
Yes, maybe I should first say that this is a process that took 8 years to get here. We already lodged this complaint against Julius Malema 8 years ago. And the wheels of justice are turning very slowly in the country, and sometimes it doesn't turn. What we are fortunate in this case, you have these pockets of excellence within the criminal justice system. We fortunately had here police people that did their investigation work thoroughly. You had in the prosecuting authority people that were willing to act without fear, favor, or prejudice. of course, we had to pressurize the system to get to this, and you had a magistrate that did not allow herself to allow people to intimidate her. But what is happening now, of course, in the country, you have a lot of appeal processes that can go ahead. So even if the magistrate said that he cannot appeal the finding of guilty against him, how it works in the country, you can now petition a higher court, even if you don't have permission. So they'll go to the High Court. I predict eventually it will go to the appeals court in Bloemfontein and eventually to the Constitutional Court. So he's playing for time at the moment. But we are not going to get tired. We've been working on this for 8 years. And if it takes us another few years, so be it. But I'm a firm believer in the fact that justice will always prevail. It might not prevail now, it might not prevail in a year, but if good people continue to work for justice, in the end, justice will prevail. And Julius Malema will have his day in jail. We just must make sure that they cannot manipulate the system. You spoke about the Judicial Service Commission. Just to give you an example, when we took the Kill the Boer case, we went to the appeals court. The Julius Malema, of course, was the guy that we took it against. And there was an acting judge called Judge Raylene Keithley. And she was, at that stage, one of the candidates to become a permanent appointment in the appeals court. She was also somebody that made negative remarks about AfriForum before. So we asked that she recuse herself. In the end, she found in Julius Malema's favor. And then after that, she got an appointment, a permanent appointment as an appeal court judge. So you had a weird situation. Julius Malema sits on a committee that the Judicial Service Commission that has to decide on her appointment while she is judging in a case where he's involved. So those things, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see this is not fair. So we have to continue pressurizing this. It might be a long route because if you have a jail term without the option of a fine of more than 1 year, you cannot be a parliamentarian. And you have to serve your sentence. And then after you've served that for 5 years, you have to rehabilitate before you can get in. So if we get him to jail, in the end, it would mean that he cannot be on the Judicial Service Commission. But we believe it would be proper for political parties in Parliament to take up this issue, because Parliament can appoint 6 members of the Judicial Service Commission, 3 of them from opposition parties, and Julius Malema is one of them. We know that John Slope from MK has been removed. He was appointed by MK through Parliament. So hopefully political parties in Parliament will take it up. Our role would be to make sure that he goes to jail, and that would solve the situation, would also solve it. But unfortunately, it's still going to take a long time.
I mean, it's almost comical. I mean, honestly, you have to wonder if this has been in a republic sometimes. And sorry, no insult intended to South Africa, but I mean, an impeached former judge, John Slope, and a convicted felon, both sitting on Judicial Service Commission selecting judges, and a judge overseeing a case in which the person who can appoint her voted to appoint her, and there's no conflict of interest. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. But let me ask you another question here, Kallie. So last time I visited AfriForum, I rocked up on a braai, and morale was high and things were great. How are things at AfriForum? Is membership going well? Is morale high? Is it low? I mean, how are people doing?
No, it's going very well. We are quite thankful. What has happened with all these attacks on us, it has actually, the unintended consequence it had was to consolidate our support base. because the best way to get, if you want people to choose our side, you must come with unfair attacks. Even people that might have questioned our visit to Washington, when we were accused of high treason, people said, no, then they took our side because the attacks on us are so ludicrous. So we are thankful that we are strengthening our support base. Our structures are being strengthened in terms of our neighborhood watches. We now have a new project on grassroots level that we've started last year, appointing full-time employees, which we call neighborhood teams, that fixes roads, cuts grass, cleans up our suburbs. In the past, we just used volunteers for this. But as our organization strengthens, we can now appoint people to also permanently do this. So we believe that is good progress that we've made. So we are upbeat. Our colleagues in the Solidarity Movement are also doing very well. We are seeing the academia campus. They started building. The groundworks were completed last year already, and they started building this year. It's going quite well. The Artisan College is full. Marula Media is growing in terms of still being the biggest Afrikaans media platform in the country and, of course, in the world. And also in terms of our other projects where we involve the Voortrekker Monument, things are well. The economic model we are fine-tuning it, because in the past we were very reliant on foreign tourists. But with COVID, we saw you can't simply rely on that. So we had to make sure that we have other income models. So I think broadly, things are going well, not because of government, despite government, because the pressure we are under, that's consolidating our people, and it actually motivates them to work even harder. So we are thankful for that.
Well, a couple of final things before we wrap up, Kallie. The first is, one of the challenges, and I think AfriForum identified this a long time ago, is that there is a large expatriate community of South Africans abroad, particularly of Afrikaners, who are living abroad in multiple countries, particularly in the UK, but also in Japan, France, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, well known. Of course, Perth, I call that Pretoria East. That's just me. Yeah. But and when I'm there for the World Cup next year, I'll definitely be calling it Pretoria East, hopefully having a lot of braais while I'm there. But is AfriForum looking at 80 South Africans leaving the country every day? And I'm not even talking about President Trump's refugee program. I'm just talking about 80 South Africans. This is what the government itself reports, leave the country every day. And most of that's good human capital. But in addition to that, now there are nearly 6,500 South Africans who've come over, mostly, or well, over half are Afrikaners, but they're all South Africans and racial minorities. Is there a plan or an effort to take a look at continuing to get support from people who love their country and feel they were forced to leave and maybe they want to contribute in some way from this side? I don't know if that's an issue or something AfriForum's looked at. I'm sure you're not encouraging people to leave, but are you looking to still maintain ties with those who had to leave?
Yes, of course. We see the future of Afrikaners as a people here, but we respect the fact that people can make decisions for themselves, and we see those people that have left still as our brothers and sisters, and we have to keep contact with them. So we've been doing that quite a while. We have a project called AfriForum Wêreldwyd, or AfriForum Worldwide. People can go and look on our website, wêreldwyd.co.za or .co.za, to see the projects we have there. What we've started a few years ago was a newsletter at first. It developed into a website where Afrikaner businesses can advertise there for free. They get on the list. So if you're in Perth and want to know where to go and buy biltong, it will be listed there. But then, of course, there's also people want to still experience their culture, and in a foreign country, it's quite hard. So we took hands with an organization called Afrikaans is Lekker. It's Afrikaans is nice, but probably meaning more or less that. So last year there were 23 music festivals across the world. And we are a sponsor of that. So then top artists like Bob van Blerk, Bobby van Jaarsveld, Rikus Nel, Juanita du Plessis, Bernice West, and a number of them go over there to hold these concerts. And those concerts are sold out. But it actually shows you how many Afrikaners have left the country. So it's held in Auckland, in Christchurch, in Perth. I was there in Perth with a concert there, and it was totally sold out. We also have one in Dubai, in Amsterdam, in the UK, in Canada, as well as in the US. So we are going to continue with that, trying to keep in contact with Afrikaners. And then there are also some that join us. If they go to our website, we also have an international membership division. So we are quite thankful for the support we are getting from the diaspora.
Well, that's pretty awesome. In fact, I just went to a Brian Poikie Fest in Kings Dominion in Virginia, where I was actually a judge for the Poikie. And famously, I don't eat lamb. That's for Welsh, not for me and Australians.
Yeah.
I also don't eat oxtail because that's where the cows poo. But anyway, but I did eat lamb and oxtail. And ironically, the team that I was on is actually the team that selected the winning Poikie, and it was a lamb shank. Brilliant, huh?
Okay. Okay, no, I'm glad you had contact with good lamb. I hope you continue eating it, or you'll probably just have to wait for the next Poikie competition.
Well, I've been invited back next year and expect to be a judge as well, so I'll have to try it again next year. But some of those Poikies were really good. But also at that event, Fat Man performed. He was amazing. He's not so fat anymore. He's lost like 46 kgs.
No, no, he's not fat at all. I went to Mozambique with him, but before he was famous, and he's actually quite he could have been a comedian as well in terms of discussions you have with him. But I'm also glad that his career has taken off, and that he also then can take our culture to Afrikaners in the US.
Indeed, but there's also a famous group that many South Africans are familiar with. It's not a very Afrikaans-sounding name, but they're definitely Afrikaners. But they're resident here in the States now, and that's the Campbells. They were also there, and they were incredible.
Yeah. No, the Afrikaners would know them well. They've got songs like Rooi Rock Bokkie. I don't know if they, and they've got a country vibe. The one that they sing in English is Hillbilly Rock, Hillbilly Row. I don't know if you know that song.
Oh, they sang both of those songs. They sang for 2 hours nonstop. It was incredible.
Yeah, no. So, well, it's good that you could have experienced that as well.
Well, Kallie, I did want to ask you very briefly about, this will be the last question unless something crops up in your conversation here, is that about the community safety forums that AfriForum does, the patrols that you're doing. These are all things that members of your organization do. I've participated in them in Zeerust, and I can say, I think we've talked about this before, but just many audience are new here. When I went out on patrol with the folks in Zeerust from AfriForum, we went to every neighborhood. We went to the townships. I didn't even know there was an Indian community in Zeerust, which I feel a little bit embarrassed because I've only been to Zeerust like 500 times. I just didn't know that. I drove by it many times. I didn't even know Indians lived there, but there's an Indian community there. We went to the townships. We went to all the neighborhoods, and there was no differentiation by the people doing community patrol to protect their friends and neighbors based on race or ethnicity. It was trying to protect the community, not just the Afrikaners, but everybody in Zeerust. And I have to applaud AfriForum for that, and I'm grateful they allowed me to go on that. Of course, having been a soldier, going on patrol is second nature to me, but it was nice to get back in the saddle.
Yes, we are thankful for some progress we've made since we spoke last. We have now also received official approval to train drone pilots to give them recognized qualifications because, as one can understand, to be a drone pilot, there's a lot of training that needs to be done, even medical examinations. And it was also always a hard process because you had to have somebody else do it. And I think that is huge progress for us that we can now do that training. Because if we want to make sure that where the criminal justice system fails us and we have to do community policing, technology is essential. So in terms of the control rooms that we've set up, the role that cameras and drones plays in this, we are growing in that regard. And I think that is something that also gives me hope.
Well, Kallie, as far as drones, I've tried to help folks in that field, particularly farmers, not related to AfriForum, but the government of South Africa certainly makes it difficult to purchase drones and to fly them and use them. But I can tell you that 700 meters from my house is a drone manufacturing building. Folks I know who want to enter the South African market. And if folks at AfriForum are interested in being put in touch with them, Jacques or somebody like that, I'll be happy to make that introduction. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but it's my pleasure to do that if that's of interest.
No, most definitely. I really appreciate that. And Jock is the right person that you can contact.
All right, I'll do that. Well, with that, Kallie, I want to thank you for your time today. Very generous. I know you had a very busy day. It's the end of the day. Your wife is probably like, where is he at? He's still not home. So I do appreciate you spending time with us. Any final thoughts you want to share with the audience before you take off?
Well, I think people might, if you listen to all these things that are happening in the country, it would be easy to become despondent. But that is our biggest enemy is if people become despondent, because then you think, well, it's the end. And you not say, if I can't change things, then you're not going to try. And it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if you don't try to bring about change, you won't bring about change. And therefore, there's a lot of good reasons for us to build a future. Our children will get the future that we built for them with our own hands and with our own brains. And that is a nice challenge to have, to know that you can write the future. You cannot write the future for next generations to come. And that is good enough motivation for people to get involved. What is fortunate that, many people would say, well, these are pipe dreams. And I can understand that because there were many instances where people saw things didn't work. But that's why I'm so grateful for the solidarity movement, because the things that have now, that also from our side of, as part of the movement, that has come to the fore, it's living monuments saying this can be done. And you can see it is working. So let that be a motivation for all of us to work harder and to look forward to the future.
Well, Kallie Kriel, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. It's very kind of you to share with us. Also, give us insights in your meeting recently with Jacob Zuma, which was the premise for this conversation. We've gone very far afield to talk about a lot of things, including Julius Malema's sentencing. So, buy a donkey, and I look forward to seeing you on my next visit.
Nee, baie dankie. As ek Afrikaans praat, kan ek nog baie meer sê, but with my English, this is as far as I'll go.
No, look, I understand you speak English in self-defense. I get it.
Yes, no, that's most definitely so. Thank you.
All right, I'll let you drop off there, and I'll wrap up here. Thanks a lot to my guest, Kallie Kriel, the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of AfriForum. And so thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to hit the like button if you don't mind. Negligence on the likes there. A lot of people watch this stream, but we need to get some more likes on that. Do appreciate it. Feel free to comment in here as long as you're respectful. And thank you all for being here. I'm flying tomorrow evening to Tampa, Florida. Orlando, Florida, where I'll link up with South Africans in the Tampa, Clearwater, St. Petersburg area on Saturday and possibly Sunday morning as well. And then on to Orlando Sunday, and we'll have Monday to be available in the area. to meet up with South Africans. For those who've offered me accommodation, thank you so much for that. Because of the compressed timeline, I've had to be very circumspect about how I do it. The generosity of people is appreciated. I'm not turning down your offers out of spite or for whatever reason, simply because I need to have the flexibility. So thank you all for that, and thank you to Kallie Kriel. We'll catch you later. I will be on tonight, and tonight, hopefully we'll have results from the initial results from the British elections today, and Sir Keir Starmer. I hope that the Labour gets crushed. Not that I want to see the Tories do well. I'd love to see reform rise in the UK, but I don't know what's going to happen. So we'll wait and see. That's coming up later this evening as they're at the polls right now. All right, folks, thank you very much. God bless and have a good evening. And thank you once again to my guest, Kallie Kriel. Cheers. Oh, by the way, you'll be redirected to Ronaldo's stream from here, so enjoy.